I think a question many people will have is, why is the game called Mouthwashing? Like, yeah, it's in the game, but to center a majority of the promo material and even name it after mouthwash is, well, it's a bit odd. Names are important, and is even something I struggle with as an artist myself. I think this comes down to two key factors, and the first one we'll be tackling is about the role of capitalism in mouthwashing. The second, then, will be tackled later in this video. Now, the Topar itself is a capitalistic nightmare, and it's clear that Pony Express cut a lot of corners when setting up its long hauls. But honestly, I feel like that's rather obvious to virtually everyone who has played or watched the game. Instead, I want to focus on how it impacts the characters, specifically. Curly is someone who has climbed the ladder of his career. He is at the pinnacle of cargo hauling, being the captain and pilot. And yet, he is unsatisfied. He wants to move careers because he believes there is more for him out there, a greater purpose. And this is incredibly interesting to me. If you're a subscriber to this channel, it's likely you've seen what is by far my most popular video on the channel, my analysis of Cyberpunk Edgerunners. And in that series, David Martinez has not the same path that Curly has, but rather shares that sense of a higher calling, to transcend the bounds of his means and become something more. In Edgerunners, this desire is fueled by the society he lives in, the City of Dreams, as well as the wishes of his mother, who wanted him at the top of Arasaka Tower. His pursuit then was riddled with low self-esteem, as the city has internally reinforced to him that he is worth nothing more than the trash that litters the street. We don't get a lot of backstory for Curly. I've heard we get a bit of the narrative behind him and Jimmy's relationship in the DLC for Wrong Organ's previous game, How Fish is Made. But this is an analysis of Mouthwashing the game, so I don't want any supplementary material to get in the way of that, even interviews about the game. Despite a lack of significant backstory, we could still break down through a broader perspective how capitalism influences Curly. The basis of a free market system is that anyone can rise to the top of it. And while this is theoretically true, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that it's much harder, and importantly, much more complex than that. Your environment and wealth make it so you may have a lower or much higher starting point as compared to other people. Many impoverished neighborhoods also don't have the proper education, as the system is completely outdated, at least in the US. But even more importantly, just like David, being poor has a significant impact on self-esteem and how abstract your dreams become. The son of the Arasaka executive in Edgerunners had, assumably, a solidified dream. That is because he has seen firsthand the process of how to rise to the top, and knows that he has the means to make this possible. Someone like David, however, intentionally has a very abstract, loosely defined dream, to rise to the top of a metaphorical tower, which eventually becomes realized, kind of, by him climbing to the top of the literal tower. He does not understand the actual steps to achieve any level of success simply because no one around him has been successful. Then pair this with him knowing his place in society and internalizing that financial oppression within himself, and not only does he not know the steps, he can never actually visualize himself climbing them. It's kind of like being a YouTuber. Now, I was not raised impoverished. My family did not live paycheck to paycheck, although I basically do now, but the pursuit of such a lofty goal as full-time YouTube, well, I always tell myself I'll make it as a YouTuber. And while I'm just conceited enough to believe I have the ability to do that, I can't actually visualize it. It's not so much a goal as it is an abstract dream. And I think that's the main difference between someone like the son of the Arasaka executive and David Martinez. For an even more extreme example, let's take a look at Denji from Chainsaw Man. He not only doesn't know the steps, but he is so impoverished and down on his luck that his dreams don't even extend that far to know that those steps exist at all. Instead, his dreams are based around his primal instincts, is that's all he has to fall back on. Eating fancy toast and going on a date with a girl. This limited scope obviously applies to Genji, and to a lesser degree David, but even someone like Curly experiences this. Unless you're the dude that wasted like $40 billion to buy Twitter, there's always going to be someone more successful than you. Someone richer. The dream of becoming the best is not even just essentially unattainable, but even that is so purposely abstract that it keeps all the cogs in the machine moving. In voiceover note here, I think it says something that being the best is considered being the richest in this society. Just throwing that out there. Within a capitalistic society, everything is for profit. There is no deeper meaning than squeezing out as much money out of the population's labor as possible. The system does not view people as individual human beings, but rather parts of a whole. Money itself is based on value, but where does that value derive itself from? A market that has no higher value itself? Think about it. What purpose is there to generate more money other than the simple act of doing so? And this is to say nothing of how the entire system is for the benefit of a select few. But with even the richest people on this planet, they lack foundational purpose. Innate human nature says we must kill and gather our own food, and build our own houses with our hands. But in the last 2,000 to 3,000 years or so, that has drastically changed. But you can't expect a species that's lived for 297,000 more years than that to instinctively catch up as fast as technology progresses. The greatest play ever written, Death of a Salesman, no arguing there, has many themes, with this being one of them. Willy Loman, the titular character, starts a garden, as to grow something with his own hands. In a world where value in money is so subjective, it helps to hold objective value in your hands. Instead of a direct deposit you got from working on something completely unrelated to human survival, like telemarketing or something, you can gain actual food that will sustain you. Of course, you do need a job to survive and buy groceries. I'm not that disconnected from reality. My greater point here is that we are so disconnected from our line of production and survival that we can't bear to watch a factory farming documentary that can easily eat meat bought from the grocery store. Most people couldn't even kill an animal. But maybe that's my vegetarian side talking, who really knows. Also, voiceover note here again, farmers kind of have that line of production. You know, some people do, but like the vast majority of people don't. And being a farmer is really hard, so maybe that's not the right path. I don't even know. Furthermore, once we stop finding intrinsic value in our work, we also stop finding it in ourselves. As I've said, we are viewed as nothing more than cogs in a machine. And very little of us provide essential value to the survival of a specific machine. We are not needed for the livelihood of some small tribe. When Willie pronounces to the world, "I am Willy Loman," a scene that made me tear up when I saw it in person, that was him attempting to reclaim the inherent personal value he had never been born with in the first place. Even for the richest person in the world, Elon Musk, he isn't actually needed. And by a lot of people, he's not even wanted. He makes electric cars, fires rockets into space, and promotes conservative propaganda on a social media platform he previously stated needed to be politically neutral on the topic and its leadership. Even he lacks intrinsic value, even though he's climbed to the top of his own ladder, and in most people's eyes, the ladder of the world. Curly in this scenario is Musk. He has climbed to the very top of his career path. He doesn't really find any sense of fulfillment in it at all, because it doesn't have any inherent value. Even at the top, he is still so disconnected from the job he actually does and what purpose it provides to society that he likely doesn't even know what cargo is on board. So then, what is on board? What could possibly make this living nightmare, this hellish landscape, worth suffering through.
Polly says, mouthwash!
It's mouthwash. Literally mouthwash. I don't even own mouthwash, for God's sake. All of this for something that cleans your teeth just a little bit more. A little bit extra. It's not necessary for survival. If it were, perhaps the crew would have survived longer. This is part of the reason why I believe the game is called mouthwashing. It's actually comical that all of the suffering is for this product. To me, it's the ultimate antithesis to inherent human value. The perfect disconnect from human need. Jimmy is a whole other person to dissect, and while I'll be breaking him down completely in his own separate section, I do want to say this now. He's the David Martinez in this scenario, albeit much shittier. He isn't at the top and has no real vision of what that even looks like. When he becomes a new captain, all he ever says is, "I'll take care of it," all while ignoring the one thing he should actually be taking care of. Taking responsibility for. But don't worry, we'll be getting to that later. When Pony Express tells the crew this will be their last flight, that breaks Jimmy. The ladder he'd been trying to climb suddenly fell, and he had nowhere left to go. But importantly, none of this excuses his horrible actions, and most of them happened before the fact anyway. And as the brilliant film Saturday Night Fever points out, no matter what oppression you face, it's ultimately on you at the end of the day to, well, not be shitty. But again, we'll be getting into all of that. Capitalism itself seeps into every facet of the game. This is why Polly, the Pony Express mascot, appears everywhere. It is a symbol, the company always watching. It is also a pair of eyes that stare at Jimmy, reminding him of his sins. I think Swansea's final dialogue before he is shot says it all. Once he got his life together and moved up the ladder to make himself a better man, it was hollow, empty, because he wasn't doing what he wanted to do. Instead, his fondest memories are of him getting drunk. So then, what are we to do? Well, friends, I think the only answer to that is to live freely how we want to. With some obvious exceptions, of course. I'm looking at you, Jimmy. I want to be a filmmaker, and yet I've been told time and time again that I should just get a full-time job already. And while I understand this sentiment, I think so many of us go into jobs we hate, or can just barely tolerate, because we think we're supposed to. But even as a filmmaker, my dream, like I said, I offer nothing necessary to society. I'm still a cog in the machine, and I'm even more still disconnected from the production line. So what's the solution? Is there one? And my own answer to that is to live with intention. I've talked about Walden by Henry David Thoreau in another video. That one on The Wild Robot. Please go watch the movie and the video. It's really good. Actually, I just bought a copy of Walden 20 minutes before I wrote this section. And in the book, as Thoreau lives in a cabin in the woods, he ends off with one important thing. You don't have to live in a cabin in the woods to appreciate life. You just actually have to be present in each moment. And that can be hard in modern reality. Is not every second is fun. And in this hyper reality we find ourselves in, where every second should be instantly fulfilling, well, it's hard to fulfill what Thoreau wants from us in the book. But as the film About Time tells us, we can still appreciate the small beauties of each moment, even if said moment isn't necessarily what we would call fun. A smile, a fresh cup of coffee in the morning, a small typo on a report that brings a chuckle. These things bring us something. And while that something isn't necessary for survival, or part of the production line, or even fun, it's still something special. In Walden, Thoreau, an avid reader himself, comes to find that he doesn't need to read books anymore, because the birds and trees have told him everything he needs to know. Live for those things. It doesn't matter if you're necessary, because you, by being alive on this beautiful planet, are beautiful. And I at least think that's what really matters. To end this section off, or this video if you're watching this separately, I want to share 2 poems I wrote. This wind, it is a soft one, that brushes only a gentle cheek. It carries with it a longing untold, unspoken except at this hour, this most intimate hour, where the sun sleeps and the moon finally reveals itself. Myself and the moon are friends, you see, as we laugh and share stories of days that are but a trifle. The swans join in on the fun and allow us to listen in on their quacks, those which could be a curse or a love confession to each other. I can't yet know which it is. And when all becomes quiet and we collectively sit in silence, the moon, the swans, and myself are at peace. And as a comforting dark engulfs us, we form what is called the night. Quiet ripples echo throughout a liquid space. The wind yields to disturb, but flows along with the current. Or rather, it perhaps creates the current. A question to ask when relating it to heaven and earth. Tap, tap, tap. The fairies dance upon the surface, a slow rumble reaching the water's depths. To what wonders may arise from this quiet force? A world unknown and unexplored, whispering during a noisy day but chanting on a silent night. Stomp, stomp, stomp. The trolls pace under the bridge, waiting for the time in which you will ask directions for your next journey. The sails of their ships are ready for your call. I implore you to heed it and explore, my friends. For what sights may await the curious mindscape. Go, run before it's too late. Leave this place and go. Flap, flap, flap. You see the pigeons, now white, fly invisible with the breeze, announcing the coming of the queen. Her feathers are clear, the future is near. Go towards that dying light. And with that angel, exploration is able. Fall into that inevitable night. If you enjoyed this video, just know it's actually a small snippet of a much, much larger analysis of mouthwashing. One that you will see on the channel soon. If you couldn't already tell from me saying in this later section a million times. So please, if you want to see all there is to uncover on this masterpiece of an indie gem, then subscribe to the channel. Might as well throw this video a like while you're down there. It certainly wouldn't hurt. And, as always, thank you for watching.